We will have completely open phones throughout the entire third hour today. I'm your host, Alex Jones. Thanks for joining us. This hour, James Wesley Rawls, one of the top survivalists in the world, most respected, best-selling author of fiction and nonfiction, is with us. If you just joined us, some stations just carry the second and third hour. The second nurse in Dallas was flying all over the country visiting family, was going to Ohio and other areas. And this Ebola outbreak, as I said last week, is an October surprise. The Hill is now saying that, and that both parties are battling with each other over the response. Well, Barack Obama and the CDC are criminally negligent bare minimum. That's not my view. It's a fact. The default laws, we've written articles about it, the default procedures are what England and France did 2 months ago when this hit epidemic levels in West Africa. Stop all the flights from there and tell anybody if you're originating out of a West African country, you're going to be turned away when you get here. Instead, we got people flying in who are obviously sick, fleeing to get medical care from collapsing countries like Liberia, vomiting all over the planes. 2 weeks ago, airline workers and airline cleaning crews went on strike. And they said, because we go on the planes and there's vomit everywhere. It's safe to say with collapsing countries that we just haven't learned yet in the last 21 days. They're probably covering up other Ebola cases around the country. I said, undoubtedly, these nurses are going to get it. They said you had to vomit and do an open wound. That's not true. That was Ebola 30 years ago. This Ebola has mutated over 330 times now. It is spreading. The UN estimates 1.4 million will get it. Some German estimates by top virology institutions are 5 million will die. Will die. I don't know. All I know is they're still saying, hey, you can come here if you're from West Africa. We might finally put some people screening for fevers or whatever. But what if people are just on business from these West African countries and don't know they have it? It incubates for 21 days, not 3. So this isn't the 1980s or 1990s or 2000s Ebola. It's new. They believe it can survive longer, in particular, namely bat feces and urine raining from the sky. That's probably what's spreading it. Most top scientists, you can look it up, it's even the Washington Post, believe that. If it gets into mammals here, oh my gosh. You've got compromised immune systems with all the flu shots that lower your immunity on record. They're saying take the flu shot so you won't get quarantined and mistaken with a respiratory illness, how this starts, with flu-like symptoms. So they're now pushing the flu shot with it. Unprecedented. Now the UN says it can become a global catastrophe if it isn't stopped in 60 days. The answer is give them more funding. Ohio Health Department says the second Texas nurse traveled there and spent time there from October 8th to the 13th. Now, joining us is James Wesley Rawls, and he has been, again, a top survivalist since he's been a survivalist since his teenage years, been a top survivalist for decades. Survivalblog.com is his very popular website. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from San Jose State University with a minor degree in military science, history, and military history. He's a former U.S. Army intelligence officer who held top secret security clearances with special background investigation and access to sensitive compartmentalized information. He was awarded Officer Specialty 35A, Tactical All-Sum Intelligence Officer, and Additional Skills Identifier, 5M Electronic Warfare Officer. He achieved the rank of Captain, attended the Army NBC Defense Officer School, so he can speak to Ebola. That's nuclear, chemical, biological, as well as the Northern Warfare School at Fort Greely, Alaska. But really where he's been successful is in the market of ideas with millions of survivalists, one of the top survivalists out there, and a best-selling fiction and nonfiction writer with a string of New York Times bestsellers under his belt and a very popular guest on this show. So I want to thank him for coming on. He won't even have his face seen for really a decade. He believes the collapse is so serious and that the threat of biowarfare, nuclear, you name it, and here he is now to speak to all this. He had his last bestseller out about expatriates. His new one is about a fictional liberator group that I guess takes the country back after collapse, or 1776 Part 2. He'll give us a little sneak peek on those books coming out at the end of the month, the new book, The Liberators. But I tell you, James, I want to get your take on this. I don't know your take yet, but mine is bottom line, They are criminally negligent. I believe they did this on purpose, knowing they could let it spread. It'd be a good political diversion. Even if it makes Obama look bad, it diverts from Benghazi, from Fast and Furious, from IRS Gate, from all his executive orders on coal power plants. I mean, he's making a move right now. And again, the bureaucracy stands to gain getting more power from this. But, I mean, heads need to roll. When we start lowering more Americans into coffins, into the ground, we need to punish this disgusting bureaucracy, not reward it with more funding because they, quote, screwed up the Ebola outbreak of 2014.
Well, Alex, I think you're certainly right that there's criminal negligence. It remains to be seen whether or not the introduction of Ebola into the country was intentional. That may be very difficult to pin down, but you're certainly right about it being criminally negligent. Everything the administration has done has exacerbated this problem, and we are on the fast track to a full-blown pandemic, a global pandemic. There are so many unanswered questions about Ebola that it makes my head spin. It's uncertain how long this virus can survive on surfaces. It's uncertain how long it remains in the system of someone who has, quote, recovered, unquote. There's some evidence that it might even be a chronic venereal disease. And given the sexual practices in Africa, that doesn't bode well, at least for the African continent. And
that's right. For those that don't know, just to back you up, it can live in the sperm now or the testicles for 70 days. And they do now officially in the deeper literature call it basically a venereal disease.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Well, yeah, but the key question is, can it be easily transmitted through the air, not just with vomit, not just with blood, but with just very fine droplets from breathing? If that's the case, we could have a pandemic that is very, very difficult to stop. And from a preparedness standpoint, every American citizen needs to think very seriously about how they would go about self-quarantining their family to protect themselves from this.
I also think it's important to let the feds know they've clearly been standing down and are still standing down. And when tens of thousands of Americans contract this and die from it, or maybe even millions, if it keeps going down this road, that's where it is going now, folks. We can now officially say this is on the fast track to global pandemic, and our government has stood down, and they need to know that we are going to hold them accountable one way or another. And if they get that message that we know they're behind it, they may back off and actually try to contain it now. But, James, it may be too late. If hundreds and hundreds of people have been exposed, if more people are coming in out of West Africa every day by the hundreds they report, who knows how many patient zeros there could actually be out there?
Well, yes, we basically lost control of the situation by not sealing our borders early. The president should have been calling Madagascar months ago. And now it's going to come down to individual families having to do the same thing and contain themselves so they don't get exposed to it. It's going to be an economic catastrophe if nothing else. Can you imagine what's going to happen to retail in this country, to movie theater chains, to organized sporting events, to concerts? No one's going to want to go out in public once this gets spread. So it's going to shut down our economy, if nothing else.
Which they've been moving to shut down what provided 52% of our power. Now it's 30-something coal. They're moving to shut down our industry with regulations and taxes. Obamacare is meant to shut things down. Classic Cloward and Piven, Agenda 21, to make us dependent. I mean, this fits right into the plan to implode the country, James.
It certainly does. And you mentioned power production. That really is the linchpin. And as I mentioned in one of my previous interviews with you, if the power grids go down, all bets are off. Then we could see a total economic collapse, not just a depression. And in the case of Ebola, if it gets widespread enough that people are afraid to go to work, and some of those people are going to be public utility employees, people who work at nuclear power plants, people who work at coal-fired plants, people who work at natural gas-fired plants. And all of those require a certain level of staffing. And in the case of nuclear power, which is predominant on the East Coast, if there isn't a threshold of staffing that is met by NRC regulations, those nuclear power plants have to be shut down by law. So I think we could very well see not a full-blown martial law situation, but a sort of selective martial law where the employees of hospitals are essentially going to become indentured servants, and perhaps even the other public service employees, police officers, firefighters, and the employees in the power industry are essentially going to be required to show up for work, and they might even be housed overnight. They might be taken away from their families and not be allowed to commute, basically be captive at their positions if things get bad enough. And given the proclivities of the Obama administration, I don't think they would hesitate at all to do that.
If they think they can get away with it and have the controlled media at Media Matters somehow blame me, and I mean, they actually are saying that I'm crazy for saying Ebola would spread and that Obama wants it to be here intentionally. Well, by default, that's what they're doing. And even though Obama's a puppet, the buck stops with him. And this is the first administration we've ever had that was clearly, purposely trying to destroy the country. We don't need Common Core teaching us that the Constitution is a racist terrorist document. We don't need the political correctness that's really a tyranny against free speech. What we need is real freedom. Thomas Jefferson style, George Washington style. James Wesley Rawls is our guest, survivalblog.com, one of the top survivalists and best-selling authors, former U.S. Army intelligence captain, and he's with us. He got cut off by the break. He was trying to jump in with a point on my point, if you just joined us, that this is now premeditated, even if it was incompetence before. They are taking the second Ebola nurse patient to Atlanta to a little bit better facility, but the default was level 4 emergency facilities or an aircraft carrier with people, the medical workers in the military that have basically volunteered when they signed up for something that's hazardous. Now, from my reading of the law and common sense and default, that's why I think it is a conspiracy, James, is if you have defaults in position and you don't send kids to school if they have the flu, but you send them to school when they have Ebola, I mean, they just can't perfectly screw up this bad. Statistically, I mean, I know you don't want to go there and say you think it's staged, but I mean, I want your real view. This is really starting to look bad. And then please continue with your point.
Well, I think it is about as bad as it could get, given public policy. In the great chess game of politics, I think that every move they made with Ebola has been in the direction of furthering this pandemic. The decisions they should have made months ago weren't made, and repeatedly they've been making bad call after bad call, and the public, the generally dumb public, the GDP as I like to call them, are the ones that are going to suffer. So people need to not only hold their elected representatives accountable, but at this point, they're going to have to fend for themselves.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Look at Katrina. Look at the hurricane that hit a few years ago in New York. FEMA said closed for bad weather. It was a joke. I mean, they never protect us. My God, how bad is it going to get if it really breaks out and affects 100,000 people? I mean, that'll create total panic, James.
Yes, it will. And just the perception of the pandemic will be just as bad as the pandemic itself, because it will cause an economic chain reaction that will take down retail, it'll take down all public events, and eventually the economy is just going to come to a screeching halt. If people are afraid to go out in public, the economy is bound to at least slow down and probably collapse.
But then they can blame the derivatives and the wars and everything, though, on Ebola. They could blame the global crash on Ebola and politically get out of an economic reset, James.
It is possible. possible, yes. And in fact, it could be used as the excuse for a lot of different things. For example, one thing that most people haven't considered is that the currency that we carries germs with it. And if there's a pandemic, they could say, oh, well, this is the perfect excuse to institute a cashless society. So if you were talking earlier about cloud pivot strategy, we're looking at multiple gains for the New World Order coming out of this. The cashless society, further globalization of governance, selective martial law. There's a lot of things that could come out of this that are very bad for the American people economically, very bad for our personal liberty. We should be quite concerned about this and taking proactive steps, not just politically, but also every family needs to have their own preparation squared away, and people need to make contingency plans to hunker down in place for a period of months, if need be, to let this thing burn itself out. If it goes airborne and is spread through casual contact, it will require hunkering down in place for months. And the logistics that go along with that are pretty daunting. Just being able to handle your personal mail, for example, so you can pay your bills, will be a challenge just in itself.
And it doesn't make me have a lot of confidence knowing who the president is while this is all happening, the very group that helped orchestrate it. And I see this as a biological, medical 9/11. Just as they used 9/11 to overthrow much of the Bill of Rights and Constitution, they're going to use this now as a rollout of Obamacare, claiming federalization was the savior. They're already saying that. So we can see them writing the script. I want to shift gears into geopolitical developments as well, economic developments with James Wesley Rawls. Tell you about a couple of his new books that are coming out as well. Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield True Nascent Iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund Infowars.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox special at InfoWarsLive.com. I'm going to be honest with everybody. I'm not up here trying to be dramatic. I've seen every indicator they're getting ready for total collapse the last 4 or 5 years, accelerating. Every indicator they're preparing for gun confiscation. Every indicator they're preparing to persecute gun owners, veterans, anybody who's self-sufficient and not a traitor. And now they're public about it. Homeland Security is for anyone loyal to the Republic, anyone who's a good person. Because in a society of criminals, who are you worried about? You want to take over society? You want to feed on the sheep? You don't like sheepdogs. You want to hunt them down. So I got news for all of you. You're going to have your pension funds taken if you don't bring down the globalists. You're going to end up being a slave. That's their default plan, and they don't stop. They love to usurp. They love to take over. And the constellation of global crises, triggering the Arab Spring, funding al-Qaeda, renaming it, starting a war with Russia, accelerating, the new taxes, folks, for those that actually run a company and have employees. It's just devastating. If I expand or do anything under accrual, I like pay more taxes than money I make personally, literally. It wasn't like that 4 years ago. They are shutting the country down with Obamacare. Companies are closing everywhere. This is all designed to shut us down because the big globalist corporations are exempt. Only they can operate. It's like decompressing an airplane and then you've got an oxygen mask and you hijack it and take it to your home country. That's what they're doing is they're draining the oxygen out of the country. They've got political mask, oxygen. Here's the analogy or the parable or the allegory. And then they get the whole infrastructure. The globalist and Cloward and Piven, and we just use that because it's popularized. It's in hundreds of sociological papers to cut off the economy, make you dependent on government. It's basic domestication. That's what Agenda 21 UN treaty is. Shut off everything but what the elites control. It is the equivalent of a financial, political, sociological, cultural, spiritual neutron bomb. And by the way, Jimmy Carter didn't ban neutron bombs, and the Russians didn't either. They produced whole generations of high-tech neutron bombs. I've had top former nuclear weapons developers on who've been able to talk about it because part of it's been leaked. They can't release classified info, but if somebody else has accidentally released it, they can talk about it. They're well beyond high-tech neutron bombs. They've even developed antimatter weapons. That was in the San Francisco Chronicle. The Air Force leaked that 8 years ago. This is crazy town. And so the point I'm getting at is you and I have cognitive dissonance because we don't think like that. We think about prosperity and happiness and like people doing good. The globalists don't. This is the real deal. Now, in the political fight, there's a chance. I'm going to get James Wesley Rawls' take on this and give him the floor on other issues. If we come out, call the White House, call Congress, call the media, and say the defaults haven't been followed, which is now starting to be admitted in Bloomberg, AP, and others, you're supposed to quarantine these people and everybody that's been in contact with them immediately. You're supposed to stop the flights. If we make a big enough issue out of this, they may stop the flights. They don't want to do that, though, till it's clearly already here and spreading because they want this crisis to not go to waste. That's default. They're now on purpose doing this. They may not have up front, but they clearly are now, in my view. If we put enough pressure on them, they may have to back off. And I printed up, and they're now coming in from the U.S. manufacturer, so you can order them right now. Ebola on the front with the Obama symbol and the O, or the rising sun. And then it says Obola on the back. Now, MSNBC, with no viewers, they say they control reality. They say no one is, allowed to say this, you're racist. Well, good. We have a limited number without the blood splatters on it, and a limited number with the blood splatters on it, to associate collectivism and Obama with disease. They associate liberty movement with blowing up the Oklahoma City building, which we didn't do. They did it. The Attorney General was the Deputy Attorney General at the time, ran the cover-up. That came out in federal lawsuits. His emails ordering the cover-up of that false flag. So order the limited edition T-shirt, InfoWarsStore.com or MadeIn1776.com. And we also have the limited edition Made in 1776 Molon Labe. The belt buckle's all sold out, but we do have the George Washington one's a limited amount left. And the Molon Labe shirts with the 300 type symbol on the front with crossed M4 223s, ball caps, you name it. And all of your purchases fund this organization that is more important than ever. InfoWars, with all our guests, all our experts, all our research, our wide spectrum analysis, our deep analysis, is crowdsourced by you, buying the books, buying the videos, buying the supplements that are all high quality. Important liberty messages to help meet other people that are like-minded, to help organize in your area. Or if you're just getting prepared, high-quality Pro Pure water filters, 10% off, promo code WATER, the already lowest price. Destroys the competition in side-by-side comparisons. Don't listen to the hype. Go look at the actual statistics on the website and the videos. Whether it's high-quality storable foods at InfoWarsStore.com, or whether it is the very best supplements, the X2 Nation Iodine, that is needed in all the glands, but especially the thyroid. It has done so much for me and my health and my wellness. You've heard the listeners, what they've said with it. We have the original Survival Shield as well. The DNA Force that is on record with the Bio-PQQ and the CoQ10, the organic sources of it in very high concentrations. A true nutraceutical formulation. Competitors are 3 to 4 times more expensive in the major publications and medical. A lot of medical doctors sell this in their offices, sell their own formulas for, we're talking $300, $400, $500, just way above what we sell it for. This is an industry game changer, DNA Force, the Super Male Vitality, the Super Female Vitality, the Colloidal Silver Bullet, InfoWarsLife.com or InfoWarsStore.com. And then there's the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and all the other great longevity products at InfoWarsHealth.com. And all of your purchases support this transmission, help you with your wellness, bolstering and building up all of our immunities, getting our feet on the ground, not on our heels, but on our toes. That's what it's all about, a win-win. And obviously, if this continues to spiral out of control, it's not just us, but other supplement makers of lesser quality, or in some cases equal quality, that's very rare, are going to run out. I mean, that's what's already happening, is because people are really getting tuned in and researching what can really give them a leg up with all the things that are going on. So InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or 888-253-3139. SurvivalBlog.com is his excellent website where they're really discussing in depth, himself and other experts, what to do, the real science, not the hype, behind protecting yourself from Ebola, not just from the immune system angle, but from the sheltering in place angle. So I know where I'm going to be tonight. I'm going back to Cabela's. I'm getting more storable food, because if it isn't this crisis, it shows our government and other governments are totally inept. But I don't know how they're going to get away with France and Germany and other African countries sealing their borders, stopping the flights, but we didn't. James, you've got the floor to finish up with what an Ebola spread could look like, other economic collapse data we've got with the dollar, what you think about Russia, what you think about ISIS, all of this. You've got the floor for the balance of the hour. James Wesley Rawls.
Well, thank you, Alex. I think that your listeners are going to be head and shoulders above most Americans, because most of your listeners are well-prepared individuals. They prepared for their families nutritionally, in terms of food storage and supplements. There are folks that are not buying the big lie, and folks that will be prepared to shelter in place if the Ebola pandemic multiplies the way I anticipate. Folks need to be looking at this both from a political standpoint and a practical standpoint. And the practical measures that people have to take are, at this point, pretty evident. One thing that a lot of people have overlooked is just the sheer number of pairs of nitrile gloves and booty shoe covers that people are going to have to stock so that they can at least, go out and get their mail safely. People need to think about food storage, about water filtration. You'll certainly need a N95 or better mask. There's some evidence that the Ebola virus only measures 80 nanometers, and an N95 mask has pass-through apertures of about 200 nanometers. So what you're really looking at is something better than an N95 mask. So you're either going to want to have a full mil-spec mask, or you're going to have what's called an N99 or N100 mask to protect from Ebola. If Ebola can be transmitted through the skin, that means you're going to need a full suit, full face coverage, and the decontamination procedures that you're going to need to follow are going to be fairly complicated. Folks need to be stock up on at least a decent quality disinfectant like Lysol and spray bottles. Whoever is going to be the hapless volunteer who has to be in contact with the outside world for your family is basically going to have to stand outside in full sunlight for a half hour after being in contact and be sprayed down 3 times successively before they start to take off their protective gear. And the expendable items like the booties, the covers for your shoes, and your gloves are going to have to go right into an incinerator barrel. And the other items, after you've been sprayed down 3 different times at successive times at 5 or 10 minute intervals, are going to have to be hung up in full sunlight on say, your back porch or deck. The decontamination procedures are fairly complicated. People need to think these things through. They need to get a hold of the supplies they need now. In another month, things like nitrile gloves and N95 masks and booty covers and Tyvek suits are going to be virtually unobtainable. They will either be completely sold out in the civilian market, or they will be sidelined, basically corralled into government service by executive order. If people haven't already stocked up, they are behind the power curve. So it's important that people think these things through, that they stock up, team up, and be prepared to hunker down for an extended period of time.
That's right. And again, I've never been obsessed with the biological warfare threat until the last 6-7 years, because I saw the movements, the preparations for a biological catastrophe, and I saw the political brainwashing in the media, the preparations, and then I saw the accelerated mutations of bacteria and viruses just wiping out people in mass every winter. Hospitals just full of mystery illnesses the last 3-4 years. I lost 3 family members this year to a mystery chest illness, 2 of them that were in good shape. And the hospital doctors said, my God, it's just regularly mutated bacteria just eating people's lungs. And so even if this Ebola comes and passes like the angel of death, which I pray it will, government's doing, as you said, batting 1,000 to make it as bad as possible, which shows it's clearly on purpose, folks. You can't be so perfectly inept that you do the exact most horrible thing when it's easier to do the right thing and politically easier, and everyone's telling you do it and you won't. We are in the hands of such evil people. And I now just today realized the 2 old gas masks I've got that are N95s. I mean, I got some for the kids, but the 2 adult ones, the candles and food and, guns and all that, I've got to go out and get the gloves, the booties, the tape. I've got to prepare for all that stuff and just pray, because if it gets out there, and here's why I'm really concerned, James. They said you have to vomit into an open wound or all this, and they had the Texas board say last week, we have the clip, that, it's basically 0 chance you can get it. And then 2 nurses got it. Clearly, it's gotten more viral. Clearly, it's spreading. It's got to be hundreds of times worse than the previous one that was 30-something people. This is now 4,000 plus dead, probably a whitewash number. They're talking about millions getting it. Something has changed with the Ebola, and it's surviving longer in particular. Maybe it's gone somewhat airborne. Maybe it dies in 5 minutes in sunlight. I don't know. But, they said, oh, that's Africans. They're undernourished. That's why it's killing them. Well, it's killing people, and people are getting it over here. What does your gut tell you, James, being an NBC in the Army, doing the research, writing about this for decades, talking to all the other experts? A lot of top virologists are saying they believe it's beginning to go somewhat airborne, meaning it's not hardy, but that the virus itself, like you said, can float around in very small, globulates of mucus or spit, and that it's crossed some bridge. Clearly, it takes 21 days to gestate. Clearly, it's going longer. Something's happened, James. It's getting stronger. I don't think we can debate that, can we?
No, I think it clearly has had some mutations. The question is, has there been a receptor mutation that would make it more easily transmissible with just a droplet contacting your skin, for example? If it's a case of a virus that can that can only be transmitted if it touches a mucous membrane or your eye, then you might have a pretty good chance of having this thing stopped. But if it's something where just one droplet touches the human skin and can be absorbed, then we're in trouble. Or if it's something that can survive inside the proboscis of a mosquito, and for an extended period of time, say anywhere from 1 to 24 hours, then we're in deep, deep trouble.
Well, I think it clearly can if it's living in testicles or in sperm for 70 days, James.
Yeah, well, so we basically have to prepare for the worst and pray for the best. And we need to, if nothing else, pray for God's providence and protection for individual families, because it may come down to that. We need to get right with God, pray fervently about this, and then listen to the Holy Spirit. You know, if you feel convicted to prepare folks, get ready. Get the food supply.
Well, I've been feeling it for about a year. I mean, I've told everybody, I think really, I've never talked like this. I think the hammer's about to come down, and I feel it right now. I don't even know if it's this. It might be something else. Because you notice just all these crises are now unfolding right now, James.
Well, yes. We're kind of on the cusp of a crisis here, a major crisis. And there's been a lot of different factors that are all playing into it. Economic, sociological, political, and now epidemiological.
Yep, James, stay there. I want to ask you about their vaccine. They've now got the head of the NIH saying everybody should be forced to take it. It's now started. Veterans are on secret death lists confirmed, but in every major city in the country, they will pay to have your sex changed. And I'm not bashing people that do that. The point is, our priorities are all screwed up. Dow Jones tumbles 350 points. Kurt Nimmo has a story, just went live on Infowars.com. This is a chilling headline by Paul Joseph Watson. Houston demands to see pastors' sermons, a chilling attempt to silence free speech. And that's why I mentioned the transgender stuff. They've banned that in Canada. They arrest you if you criticize homosexuality. Whether you agree with that or disagree, agree with free speech, folks. And it says city demands religious leaders reveal communications on transgenders. I mean, this is what the city council is trying to do right now. You can't make up this bizarreness. How about you get a plan for Ebola, huh? Obama cancels trip, calls for emergency meeting on Ebola. Now that he knows it's spread beyond their control on purpose. That's just some of the news up on Infowars.com. Alexa, owned by Amazon, caught targeting conservative websites, question mark. I don't think there's any question mark about it, but it's an excellent article by Don Salazar. We subscribe to it to track it as one rating service. And our internal number, which we show, the graph shows we're exploding, but the public number they put out shows us losing like 90% of our audience. Same with Drudge, WorldNet Daily, everybody else. While Media Matters, MSNBC that we dwarf, explode. I mean, this is just totally staged. And it just shows how rigged things are. Going back to James Wesley Rawls, he'll be with us 5 minutes the next hour. Then it's your calls. I want to talk about his new book coming out at the end of the month, Liberators. James, what do you make of the head of the NIH? I have the article right here. Comes out and says, we may need to deploy the vaccine to the entire community. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the U.S. National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, the National Institutes of Health, wants to vaccinate the whole country with an experimental Ebola vaccine that just so happens is going to come out in December. The first, I guess, somewhat not approved, but ready for distribution. Well, that's right on time, James.
All I can say to folks is beware, because the history of vaccinations in this country is just checkered with horror stories of contaminated inoculants. And even if they had a successful Ebola virus vaccination, who's to say what else could be in it that would have long-term deleterious effects? I would recommend that people not take that inoculation. I think it would be foolish of them. I would much rather wait and hunker down with my family here at my ranch than go in and take that inoculation. That is absolute insanity.
Well, look, in California last year, they admitted that the MMR shot was giving people what it supposedly treated. A lot of these new vaccines are actually live viruses. I mean, I wouldn't trust this group. I wouldn't trust Bill and Melinda Gates and Monsanto. And it's not that we don't believe that there's some science behind it, inoculation theory. It's 500 years old with smallpox. It's that we can't trust this group with their whole history of secret testing.
Right. Yeah, there is great cause for concern, and I think that it would be foolish of people to just rush out and take this inoculation. Who knows? There could be, as you mentioned, live virus contamination. So instead of stopping a pandemic, they could actually be proliferating it into all 50 states with their own inoculation. So folks need to beware, and they need to be in prayer as well, that we need God's protection from this.
Oh, I have 3 children. I have a lot of family. I know a lot of you do too out there. It makes me beyond angry. It's just so disgusting they haven't shut down those flights because, James, as Africa continues to collapse, more are going to come. We may be able to contain this, but not all the new people pouring over. We'll be back in 1 minute for final comments from James. Then I got John McCain being confronted, your phone calls, and more. Third hour coming up. You need to tell your friends and family to tune in because we need to get people organized to force the control of our borders. It's just so hard to watch this country degenerate. This whole West is degenerating. It's television. People are spectators now. They just don't have a spark. And those that do are the enemy. We're the milk cows. We're supposed to do the work, do all the thinking, and then be attacked by all the parasites above and below. It's just a really bad situation. James Wesley Rawls, other points briefly on Russia, on ISIS, and tell us about your new book that's coming out.
Well, in terms of Russia and the Ukraine, I think that there'll probably be a announced political solution for the Ukraine crisis, but the long-term power game has not gone away. There's still a huge chess game going on behind the scenes, and the end result of that will probably turn out to be tilting in the direction of global governance. In terms of ISIS, we're just seeing the beginning of the spread of the caliphate. I would not be surprised at all to see most or all of Iraq fall to ISIS. And let's face it, you can't spell crisis without ISIS. They want to use this as an excuse for a continued American military presence in the Middle East that will go on for decades. And it's just another enemy du jour that that we created ourselves. Our own government created ISIS, and now they've set this puppet up as the latest bogeyman to justify a huge military expenditure.
And now Turkey is airstriking the Kurds and says they won't fight ISIS. I mean, they're there letting ISIS is their proxy army. They're just taking over. It's incredible how dumb they think we are. They're letting Ebola in. They're running Al-Qaeda under the name ISIS. Tell us about your new book coming out.
Well, yeah. On the 21st of October, my latest novel, Liberators, comes out. It's in the Patriots novel series. It's the 5th book in the series. And like the others, it's set parallel to the others. It's set just in the near future, but the geography is different. In this case, it's set primarily in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and in Western Canada, in British Columbia, in the area called Bella Coola. And I think folks will find it instructive on a number of different levels. I went pretty heavily into both intelligence analysis and guerrilla warfare tactics in this novel. And I'm probably not going to make any friends in the Eastern establishment with this novel, but, just like your radio show, Alex, they cannot stop the signal. 4 of my books have become New York Times bestsellers, and folks are eager to learn about how they can prepare.
Now, I can't wait. Come back Come back in 2 weeks when it's out. I want to carry the book at InfoWarsStore.com. In 45 seconds, I'm seeing a near total wake-up in the military. That's got to be a real ace in the hole for liberty, a real wild card for the enemy.
Well, thank you, Alex. I do want to wake people up. My main concern with my blog and my books is to wake people up, get people active politically and in terms of their preparedness. Someone needs to confront what's going on. And I believe that the American people are capable of great things. I still have a bit of hope for the political process, although things are looking a little more dim in that area. But
James, I know you got to go, but can you do 2 more minutes? I want you to finish what you're saying, and I want to talk briefly on the other side about the military waking up, what that does. Just come back for like 2 or 3 more minutes on the other side. In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars. Waging war on corruption, Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Back weeknights, 7 o'clock Central, with our great news team out of the InfoWars News Studios, InfoWarsNews.com to check that out, or PrisonPlanet.tv. Now, I'm going to give the number out in a moment, take a ton of calls this hour, get into some geopolitical news, Nielsen manipulations in the ratings, White House-run Media Matters manipulations. A lot of important information on that front, but also open the phones up for your take on Ebola and a lot more. But finishing up with James Wesley Rawls, who was an Army intelligence, best-selling author, 4 New York Times bestsellers. The military's always been one of the most awake groups. When 10% of the public on average knew that the Federal Reserve was private, maybe half the military I would talk to, enlisted, commissioned officers, it really didn't matter. They were more awake than the general public. They certainly knew that vaccines were experimental and killing people because they were guinea pigs. Then I would just walk down the street in Austin or Dallas or New York City, and almost every military person would run up, whether they were an officer or not, saying they were a listener. And then it started to be police doing this. And not just some police that recognized me. Most police I would end up walking by or talking to or in a restaurant turned out to start becoming awake. And then now, I was in Hot Springs, Arkansas last year, and they were having a military convention there of different types of specialists, and they were also having a water convention there while I was there. And I ran into most of the water convention people, and they were all aware of fluoride being bad and being a fraud and causing brain damage. And then I ran into the military, and they told me, about 70 to 80% are awake. Well, now a year later, I talked to military, and they go, about 90% are awake. And I mean, they know about the NDAA. They know about the FEMA camps. They know about the gun control. They know about Agenda 21 and Cloward and Piven. They know about the plan to shut off the power plants. They know our government's funding ISIS and said no last year. Remember that? All the military holding up signs saying, I won't fight for Al-Qaeda. I don't know what the establishment does when they've tried to form the military into an army to take over domestically, and they've tried to militarize the police, which they've done, but in the process, it decompartmentalized them, because in the last 5-6 years, James, as you know, we broke a lot of this, but now it's mainstream news. They come to them and actually say, Christians are bad, gun owners are bad, the founding fathers were bad. It's like something you'd expect to see in the Red Dawn movie when they show the re-education camp at the sports stadium with the movie screens going, George Washington was a pig, gun owners are bad, capitalism is bad. The propaganda of the people running things is so horrible, it makes you think they're inept, because this is the stuff bad guys would tell the military. I think their attempt to demonize the liberty movement, James, has totally backfired on them and is strategically one of the biggest defeats they've had. You have a lot of military, current and former. What are they telling you? Do you concur? Do you disagree? What's your view on the military waking up?
Well, everything that I've heard in recent years is in concurrence with what you've seen. I have a lot of readers of my blog who are active duty military, and they're all telling me the same thing, that they have woken up, they have done their homework. They can see what's really going on, and they're no longer falling for the lies that the administration is trying to push. So to me, that indicates two things. One is it's very encouraging because if they ever try to institute martial law, they're not going to be able to do it with American troops. They'll have to bring in overseas troops to try to institute martial law in this country, because the American military is not going to put up with it. There's too many people, especially in the officer corps and the non-commissioned officers, who are fully awake, and they're not going to go along with it. Secondarily, everyone who leaves the military, and very few people are career military. A lot of people just do their 4 to 6 years and they get out. There's a huge number of people who now have combat experience coming home from Iraq, coming home from Afghanistan, who not only are politically aware, but they also have a very advanced skill set in at least small unit tactics and beyond. So that if we ever got into a situation where there was a war of resistance in America, as I pointed out in my novels, all those returning veterans are going to form the core cadre of the resistance. We can depend on our service members, and we should support them individually, but not support the policy.
That's right. They always spin it and say, support whatever the globalist occupied government says. That's not our military. It's like Hitler would say, support the military. Well, that means supporting Hitler. I mean, our own military now trains to take on returning veterans, where 1 week after you get out, you're now enemy number one. And they actually have the Southern Poverty Law Center and others with the FBI come in and give the troops these briefings that are so traitorous. How do the feds not know, James, that these traitorous briefings where they say George Washington wouldn't be welcome in today's Army at Fort Hood? I mean, that took the Army intelligence units there, because I know they've given me a lot of info, and they're for real. They're not just giving me disinfo, because I've checked it over the years. When they started doing that, they went from liking me and checking what I said and believing a lot of what I said to going, oh, my God, the government really is at the top alien. It really is totally fake. I just don't know what's wrong with the socialists and the globalists that they think you can call troops in and say your new enemy is America and George Washington. I mean, George Washington's on the Purple Heart. He founded the U.S. Army. I don't know how you do that.
Well, I think the globalists are naive, and all these strategic plans they have are going to come back and bite them, because we still essentially have a liberty-loving nation, and our military reflects that. In the long run, we win, they lose, and that's very encouraging.
All right, James. Well, I'm glad you're getting the same good info I'm getting. But again, it's not up to the military to get us out of this. It's up to all of us to get ourselves out of this, and to be very loud and very aggressive with the establishment and let them know that they're going to get the blame for everything. They may back off, or you can make the decision to go underground and write best-selling books to reach out to people, or you can be on the radio or do your own podcast. Whatever you do, get active, ladies and gentlemen. We have the moral high ground. We've been right over and over again. Not that it's hard. The default is very simple. James Wesley Rawls, survivalblog.com. I want to set you up right now before you're gone with Nico, our great producer. to be on as soon as your book comes out in the next 2 weeks, okay?
Well, thank you very much, Alex. It's been a great pleasure being on, and I pray the 91st Psalm for all your listeners.
Thank you so much. I'll pray it as well. They say that there are no atheists in foxholes, and I got 3 small children. I mean, one's 12, one's 10, and one's 6, and I look at them, and I'm just beyond angry with the globalists and Obama. I mean, they're just dishonorable scum who love to screw things up or create crises or let crises get worse so they get more power. And I'm going to blame some people in the system if anybody else keeps dying from Ebola. You say, oh, but car wrecks, kill 10,000 a month or whatever. I get it. But this is premeditated. And they're doing it on purpose, and they're letting these people in, and it isn't going to help Africa, and they're lying and turning off the default protections. And, folks, if they get away with this is what I keep saying. They get away with Fast and Furious and Benghazi and shutting off our power plants and teaching kids 2 + 2 = 5. The sky's the limit. Us up.
Hi, I'm Dr. Edward Group. Today I'd like to talk about the war on women. You've experienced and heard about the benefits of super male vitality. Now, the new formula has arrived. Introducing the new Super Female Vitality. I have specifically designed this formula to help the body naturally regulate itself without the use of artificial hormones. Key ingredients chosen from the highest quality sources. Each of these ingredients works synergistically with the female body in order to maximize overall vitality. You've heard the reviews and the feedback on how the original Super Male Vitality has revitalized relationships. Now, both the man and the woman can have the revitalization in their own bodies with Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality. Secure your Super Female Vitality today from our limited stock at InfoWarsLife.com.